Maria, there is a lot of talk about capping Russian oil and gas, prices of Russian oil and gas. It sounds simple. How hard is it, though?
It's incredibly complicated, Guy, and that's something that G7 leaders, of course, have come to terms with that in the summit that just wrapped up in Bavaria. It's a great idea on paper. They all recognize that politically it is toxic. It's so hard to stomach the kind of revenue that Vladimir Putin is making while the war is on. And just yesterday, a shopping center that was targeted by a Russian missile. Of course, now the Ukrainians saying they view that as a terrorist attack from the Russian Federation to Ukraine. For them, as I say, this is incredibly difficult to swallow, but then they realize the implementation of it is also very difficult. You would need to set up a price cap. Nobody knows what that cap would look like in real terms. What's the price behind it? What's the implementation of it? And then, of course, you see that there's countries like the French that say we need a global coalition. And the reality is there's countries like India, which, by the way, participated in this G7 as a partner nation, and they very much behave in a neutral way when it comes to Russia. Will they stop buying cheap Russian oil for the time being? There's no indication they're willing to do that. So they agree that that's the sense of travel they want to take. But for the time being, there's nothing specific on paper.
Yeah, the IEA in a webinar was just speaking, saying that Europe must be ready to cut gas use by 30% in winter. And that just drives home how imminent this energy crisis is, that if you don't get more actual fuel, you're going to have to cut your factory output, your manufacturing, so you don't use that kind of gas. I'm wondering if you can tell us, just you mentioned kind of the outliers like India, for example, but what's the unanimity among the G7s as they head into NATO?
And Alex, just to pick up on that point that you say, the narrative in Europe is very much changing on that front too, to say you have essentially right now 2 months to fill up your storage. If you don't, then in the winter, you're in the hands of Vladimir Putin. He can decide at any time to cut it off. In fact, the Italians, the Germans behind the scenes, they're prepping for that. And the narrative in Europe is now changing, in which both CEOs and governments officials, they now prep the public opinion to say, from now until the winter, we are in a war economy and prepared to cut down and reduce your energy consumption in Europe, which is, of course, an incredible thing to ask people to do, especially as you enter the winter. That's the most vulnerable time of the year for Europe. Now, when it comes to the G7, I mean, I've heard, and we've heard this repeatedly, the United States call for this cap. The Italians have said they want to see it for both oil and gas. The French don't oppose it, but their difference is different. They have a different view for it. But I think the real question here is, what does Germany do? And the German industry is incredibly concerned about what the next of the year is going to look like for them. And of course, the repercussions on inflation, a country that is consistently debating inflation for many reasons.